Hi, I'm Lisa. A couple of years ago I released a pattern called All My Hearts, and it's had a couple of thousand downloads since then, and I never did a video for it, so I thought it was about time I showed you the technique in full and explain a few bits along the way. So the stitches is where the magic happens, because basically you only need 2 stitches. In UK terms it's a single crochet, and in US terms it's a double crochet. That's one of the stitches, and the other stitch is a double crochet in UK terms, and in US terms is a treble crochet. It is where you make those 2 stitches that creates all of the different texture that I showed you. It's very simple, and it's even simpler because I've simplified it. I like putting things in boxes. So throughout the instructions, rather than confusing things with US terms or UK terms, I've given them names of on, off and lock. Very easy, binary language. It's actually Boolean binary, because binary only has a true and a false, where Boolean binary throws in a choice, and I like a choice. So the off stitch, like I say, is one of them, and the off stitch is a back loop single crochet or double crochet in US terms. It's made through only the back loop instead of going through both of the top loops as you normally do. Same movements, just one loop. That is made on the row, the next stitch, the row below, as you normally would make it, but only in the back loop. The lock stitch takes that same back loop of the next stitch, but it also takes one of the stitches from the row below it on the reverse of the work. It picks up 2 loops, but from different stitches on different rows. Same movement, it's a single crochet or a double crochet. You remember the movement, but you allocate a name to it to make it easier to read, and it's universal. The on stitches are the double crochets or the treble crochets in US terms. In Mosaic Crochet, the double crochets drop down 2 rows, and they normally go into the front loop, which is left behind by the off stitch, the back loop single crochet, double crochet. So it's normally made into that front loop 2 rows below where you are working, but you can either do it into the front loop, or you can do it around the post of the stitch instead of the front loop, or you can make 5 double crochets into the same front loop and make a popcorn. So there are options. It's all the same stitch, just done through different loops or in a different position, or more of them put together into the same hole. And this is what creates the texture. So rather than writing front post double drop double crochet, front post drop treble crochet, single crochet into the back loop only, or converting that to single, what is it, a double, it's so confusing, it's really confusing. So we have an off, an on and a lock, and it works for all, as do the charts. They use symbols which are offs and ons and a lock. Very easy to read and very easy to follow. Just to give you an idea of the different gauges, because it will affect the amount of yarn that you will need for your pattern. So if you do something in a double knitting weight yarn, this is the basic style. It's all flat on the front, and then on the reverse, because it's reversible, it's all flat on the reverse as well. But if you use something like this, you're going to use way more yarn in a double knitting weight yarn than what you are if you do it in something like a 4-ply or this is Angora, so it's really fine. I've used I think a 3mm hook or a 2.5mm hook. This one I used a 4.5mm hook, if I remember correctly. So it really varies which way you want to go, and you could go even with something chunky like this one's in an Aran weight, and I used a number 7 hook, 6 or 7, I think it was a 7. The back isn't flat though, I've done it with a different loop on the back, and I'm going to show you the variations that you can do. Also, there's a variation. Instead of doing this type on the front where it's pretty flat, you can do it like this, so it's more raised and chunkier, and leaving the other ones normal gives it a bit more of a quilted effect, but the back remains flat. Again, I've used the same loop as I did on this one, on that one, but because I've used the front post double crochets, it's pulled the back slightly and given the back a slightly quilted effect too. Can you see where the crosses are, maybe? The texture. And this one in the chunky Aran yarn. This one again is double knitting, but because it's been front post, it makes it look a little bit chunkier also. And this Aran one, obviously, it's just amazing. This is my most favourite thing. The most favourite thing. And then, of course, you can, instead of just doing the mosaic drop doubles like this, I'm going to explain this all so simply in a second. I'm just going to show you the differences first so that you know what I'm talking about. You can do pom-poms, popcorns, bubbles and texture. Look. Isn't that pretty? This is one repeat, and just make sure you can see that on the screen. And that's the back. If you do 10 repeats along the bottom, 10 repeats wide by 12 repeats long, and I'll explain how to do that from the chart because that's really, really easy also. If you do that, you will need approximately 20 skeins of yarn for the main body, 20 100-gram skeins. That sounds like a lot, but you will end up with the most sumptuous blanket that is, it's hard wearing, warm, and if you put the popcorns on, is incredibly snuggly, and it's almost like a quilt, but it's as light as a feather. I don't suppose it would be if it's massive, but you know. You create it to whatever size you like. These are great for placemats, and if you do one repeat with a border on, it's perfect for a mug rug or a face scrubby. Coincidentally, I also need to mention that this pattern can be made in the round. So I'm currently, well, a year and a half ago maybe, I've lost track of time, I started making sock. So this is the same design, All My Hearts pattern, which is available on Ravelry, and you can just carry on and make it in the round, which I will also explain to you. I'm just covering through the basics. So 10 wide by 12 long repeats. You will use approximately 20 skeins of double knit weight yarn using a number 5mm hook. That converts to a size H, which is a number 8 in the US. I googled, just so you don't have to. You'll need some scissors, obviously, and I've used, on most of my versions, I've used Skipja's Colour Crafter double knit weight yarn or Aran yarn. I've specified further down in the pattern, written pattern. So I've said 20 skeins, but I have actually overestimated on yarn B because there are options with obviously which way you want to do the design, and you will use more yarn if you do popcorns than if you don't. So the 10 skeins of each is overestimating on yarn B. because you really don't want to put popcorns all this bit. You will use, I mean, you can, I'd love to see that, but it will use a lot of yarn, a lot. So anyway, I've overestimated on the 10 skeins for yarn B, but that is to allow for popcorns on yarn B. Measurements, if you do 10 repeats wide by 12 repeats in length, your blanket will be approximately 135 centimetres wide, which is 54 inches, by 180 centimetres long, that's 71 inches, and that is without a border because it doesn't need a border. All of these ends that it's made row by row, you never turn your work either, so it's always made front facing. All of these ends just go into the channels that are created between the layers, and I will show you about that as well. So you don't need a border, but it's optional. If you want to add your own, you will need to add extra yarn for that. The charts in the written pattern don't have colour. It confuses things because it's reversible, this technique, and if you use colour it does confuse things. So I found it much simpler to remove the colour and leave it up to you. The charts are customizable if you want to colour them in. For the purpose of this demonstration, I am going to use colour. So I've done it on reversible card. I'm going to use colour to show you how it works, and then I'm going to flip them over to show you how it looks on the written pattern, because you will understand then more fully. So I'm just doing a little section of the cross area, and if you've watched any of my previous videos you'll know what an inchy is, and I'm just going to base an inchy with the cross design in the middle. An inchy is basically just a 12 stitch square, well it's 11 stitch square, but you start with 12 chains. Anyway, I'm going to show you now using these symbols. Coincidentally, I'm just going to mention that if you do purchase the written pattern from Ravelry, it's only available on Ravelry at the minute, but if it does become available anywhere else, I will leave the links down below in the description box, and also for Ravelry. If I'm going to print out pages of symbols so that you can print them and cut them out, do them on a coloured card if you like, and you can have a play around, because this is a really good thing. And I did find that if you take a picture at the end you can faff about with it. It's really cool. So, and also, I know I'm waffling, but I'm going to get a bit giggy about this. It works on, I mentioned binary earlier, and it's a technique called Boolean binary, and I don't think that this is just useful for making charts for crafts, for loads of different crafts. I think it's also useful in other ways, because this is what ASCII art, computer generated art, uses. So it's basically a form of code that you're making patterns with. So if your computer goes down, you can be your own little computer by making your own little code charts, right? If the power goes off, here is a self-sustainable way where you don't need a computer to make designs. And I'm going to put printouts for you to be able to use that come with the written pattern, but that is a payable pattern and it's available for purchase in Ravelry. So I'm going to get on with this now. So on, off, lock, and for the purposes of this I'm going to use colour. This is your first row, it's your foundation row, so I've marked it with F's. This is row 1 and it's a yarn A row, so it's made, in this case, pink. So row 2 is a green row, it's a yarn B row, and we have to make 11 off stitches. So all of the off stitches go into just the back loop of one in each stitch of each of your single crochets. Foundation row, that's the second row. Row 3 is a yarn A row, so you start again with yarn A, you attach your yarn, but you begin with an on stitch, whichever choice you went with, whichever option. If it was the option 1, it would go down into the front loop. If it was a popcorn, you would make 5 into that front loop, because all of the on stitches are made into the stitch 2 rows below. But because you're making this on stitch, you're not now going to see this green row behind, because that stitch covers it over. And now we have a solid row along the bottom of drop down stitches, whichever option you went with. So they are now hidden, and you've got this row along the bottom, which is one row of solid plain pink in this case, and all of your second row is hidden by those drop down stitches which link into your first row, your foundation row. So now we'll move on to the next row, which is back to a green row. Now on row 3, when we made all these drop down on stitches, we've left a lot of loops on the front, and we've ended up with a flap like this, two flaps. What we need to do is connect those flaps with lock stitches so that we don't end up with ridges like this on the back of the work, because it makes it, as you can see, and it doesn't lay flat, it bends all over the place, it isn't substantial. And I know, a lot of people are a fan of the flaps, but I don't feel that that is as substantial as that when they are locked. And I think you're going to get a hell of a lot more wear out of your work that it costs a lot of money, wool, and you've put a lot of time into it, so you obviously want it to last, and that is way more hard wearing and warmer than that is, I feel personally. So to lock them like this, you don't have to lock them if you don't want to, but my pattern uses lock stitches, and to lock them we do this. Every time in the top of a on stitch we put a lock stitch. There is no other stitch that goes into the top of an on stitch than a lock stitch, no matter what that on stitch is. Whichever option you choose to use for your on stitch, it always gets locked. So whenever you see an on stitch, there is no other option of symbol except a lock stitch above it. So that is now row 4 complete, because there cannot be anything else. The pattern now has written itself. That's code. Okay, on to row 5. So on row 5, which is a pink row, I'm going to start doing this little cross design. Now that we've got a solid base for the edge, we're going to have one to match at the top, and we're going to have one all the way around the edge, the same as this. So there's like a border, a square, all the way around the middle of a design, which is this case is going to be the cross, just for demonstrations. So I'm going to make this border continue on the edges, and I'm going to put 3 on stitches here, which are going to drop down and cover up these ones, and I'm going to mirror that on this side. So you see, whether you're left or right handed, you can follow it from either way. They're going to cover up them ones, and then I want this cross in the middle, so I'm going to start, I want it to come up the middle here and go off the middle there. So these ones aren't going to be green, they're going to be pink. So I can put them ones on, and they're going to cover them up. But I want this one to start coming up, I want this one to be green. So I'm not going to make that one a drop down one, I'm going to turn that one off, and that one's going to stay green. That one's not going to get covered over. Okay, so I'm going to make these ones all pink, and then we're going to carry on with row 6. So if you're paying attention earlier, you will notice that we have all of these on stitches, and if we don't lock them, they're going to leave a flap. So the code is dictating that we have to lock these stitches on this green B row. So let's do that. All of these ones get a lock stitch into them. So we'll just put those in place. And then remember that middle stitch I didn't put an on stitch into because I turned it off. That one now gets an on stitch because that is the start of the middle of our cross, and this one is now going to become green. I haven't got a green thing handy, but let's find one. So now the design begins, and the chart is dictating which ones we turn on and which ones we turn off. So now for row 7 is an A row, and we can already see that that one has to be turned off. So let's turn that off. And these ones, these are the edge stitch things going on, so we want those to be pink, so we're going to turn those on. I'll find the right buttons. Okay, and now this I want to be the middle of my cross. I don't want it to be pink on this bit. I want these to be turned off. I don't want to cover this over. I want to keep that bit as a cross. So I'm going to turn these off. Right, now these ones are going to become pink. And now you can start to see that our crosses appear in here. They get covered over by those drop downs. No matter which on stitch you decide to use in which position, you can mix them up. Still the same symbol, it's an on stitch. So now I've begun with row 8B, which is a green row, and these have already dictated that they have to be locked, so I've locked those. And because I want this cross to continue, I'm going to make this one a drop down on, so that this one now becomes green to complete that cross. And I don't want these to be green because that would spoil the cross shape, so I'm going to turn those off. On row 9, again, it already dictates which ones for the border, so we'll do those. And those. And then those ones below them are going to become pink because they get covered over as they drop down. This now we have the cross, and that has to be a lock stitch because there's always a lock stitch above an on stitch. No matter what it is, you lock it at the back. Avoid those flaps if you want. That's what makes the reversible design, that lock stitch. And if you don't lock it, you will get a slight sort of image of the front image, but you won't get it reversible like this is. This bit now, I've got the cross here, so I want these to be pink, so I'm going to turn those on. And that's row 9 complete. So I hope you understand how the charts are written. I'm going to now remove the colour because on the charts these won't be blank. They will have a symbol in and there is no colour. So I need you to see how the charts look on the written pattern and how customisable they are. And there are many ways in which you can use them. not just this technique of mosaic crochet, but you can use them for other techniques of mosaic crochet. And I do also have a reversible way of doing this technique. If you check out my other videos, you'll be able to see that. It's called crowfo, and it involves mirror stitches, so in effect you are crocheting backwards. It's very clever. So I've turned all the counters over for all of the rows, but I've left it marked what colour the A's and B rows are. And as you can see, it's very simple to follow, because whichever way you start from, whether you're left-handed or right-handed, row 1, it's your foundation row. Row 2, you use yarn B, it's all offs. Yarn A on row 3, it's all ons. It's very simple to see where you have to go. A one with changes in, yarn row 7, yarn A, 3 on, 2 off, 1 lock, 2 off, 3 on. What's difficult about remembering that, and you know the movements, 3 on, you know you're doing a popcorn, you do a popcorn. 3 on, if you're doing front post, you know you're doing front post. So it just flows, and it's very simple without colour. There is no confusion. If you do want to colour it in, you can do, and all you have to do is follow the lines. Because say on row 7, go down 2 rows, make that pink, 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 and then draw a line, come along, draw a line, draw a line, draw a line, come along, it's down, go back up, it's down, go back up, it's down, and you end up with ziggy-zag line like that going along, and you're colouring in with your pink line, and your green one you can't go there because it's already covered over. So if you're colouring in your chart, start at the top. It's easier to start at the top to colour it in than it is to go row by row, because if you're colouring in from the bottom up, you can't colour over what you've already done. You will end up with the symbol still showing, but your stitch will show the colour it's going to be visible as on the front of your work, not on the back of your work. And it, I think, causes confusion as to which colour you're using at the time, and I just found that removing it made it very much easier to understand for all. It's much more universal. So I'm going to add sheets on the written pattern that is available for sale on Ravelry, and with symbols on, so that it'll have like a sheet of ons, a sheet of offs. You can use the ons as locks, so you just print 2 pages of them off, you know, F's and numbers and letters. And if you want to print them on a coloured card to play with, you can do, but I'm sure, like I said, that it has more uses than what it is I've used to demonstrate it as, because it's code and it fascinates me. I've played with it so much, and I designed this several years ago now, and it's sat in tubs, and yeah, I needed to get it out, and I wasn't sure how to do it because I'm not very good with technology. I couldn't do the screen grabby stuff to show you very well. It just messed with my head, as you can imagine. So this was the easiest way, and also you get something to play with if you print it off. If not, you can just do what I've done and draw on the card and cut them out. But let us know in the comments below what you think, whether it's a good idea, if you understand it, whether it makes sense. We're going to be using Aran weight yarn in 2 contrasting colours. I've got a nice green and a nice pink, and this is going to be yarn A, which is the main colour on the front, and this is going to be yarn B, which is the hearts on the front, and on the reverse it's going to be the other way round. This is going to be the main colour on the reverse, this is going to be the design on the reverse. You'll need some scissors, and this is Aran weight, like I say, but I'm using a number 7mm hook. I can't find the conversion for that for the US terms. It doesn't list one, so an 8mm hook is an L or a number 11, but anyway, I'm using a 7mm. Aran weight yarn, if you do this on a 7mm just in normal crochet, not mosaic crochet, would come out really loose. As you can see on here, it's quite loose, but when you lock it at the back, it still has a substantial finish. But I'm also going to show you another little trick. So I'm deliberately using, this is actually a number 8. I looked on my photographs of my work in progress of doing this, and I've used a number 8 hook, which is really chunky. This one's a number 8, so you can see the difference in size. But I'm going to use a number 7 today, 7mm, and I'm going to show you a trick so that you can use a chunky hook with thinner yarn. If you were using double knitting, you could even go to a number 6 for this, I would say. Give it a whirl, what I'm going to show you anyway. So we're using this, and I'm going to begin with this one, which is going to be my yarn A, and I'm going to be working in rows today to show you the full repeat. But if you are working in rounds, cylindrical, you will only need to start with the repeat stitches, which are the middle 18 stitches shown in the large rectangle in the centre of the chart. Okay, so row 1 of the chart, row 1 is yarn A, and there are 25 stitches in the whole square. So I'm going to show you different ways to do the foundation row. They all start with a slip knot. If you're doing cylindrical in the round, only do 18 for your foundation row, but if you're doing in rows, as I am today, do the full 25. So as normal, you can do the chain like this, and then do a row of single crochets starting in the second one, then work all the way along like this, and then when you get to the end of your stitches excuse me, you can chain 1, cut and finish off, and you have a row of single crochets. That's one option. Another option is to do foundation single crochets like this. You do 2 chain, and then you make 1 single crochet into the first chain, and then you go into the left leg. It's got 2 legs, that single crochet you just made. Go into the left one, pull up a loop, and make another single crochet, and continue like that. That's another option, but I'm not going to use this option because, well, this replaces your chain row and your first row of single crochets. So you would chain 1, cut and finish off, and you can see it's a lovely neat edge. When you turn it over, it's really neat. But I'm going to start this way around my next row, so that I use these loops for my first row, and then row 3 is going to link into these loops here. But that means that I'm only left with 1 loop on the bottom, and I want 2 because that one's not very prominent and they're a bit not lined up, so it would make everything cockeyed for the border. I'm not going to do this way because I want 2 spare on the bottom after I've used that one. So I'm not going to use that foundation single crochet either. Again, a slip knot, chain 2. This time, before you go into that first single crochet, the first chain, wrap your yarn over, then go into the chain, pull up a loop, so you've got 3. Keep it loose, otherwise you'll have trouble getting through that middle wrap around. Wrap your yarn over again, and then pull through all 3. Right? Remember, this bit of your hook is the size of the hook, not this bit. That is the gauge of your hook. So if you don't pull your wool all the way up, your loop, you won't get the right size. If you're working down here, you may as well work on a number 3 hook. So Wrap your yarn over, push your hook through that left leg, pull up a loop, wrap your yarn over, pull through all three. And I'm going to do 25 of these. This is the method I'm going to use, but I'm going to show you in a sec. I know it's a little bit awkward and slower. You do get used to it. If you keep it the right tension, it's easy to get through and get in. You'll get there by just jiggling around, and you can use your hook to maneuver into the stitch as I'm doing here. Use your hook down over to open it up to sweep through, and then like this. Okay, so just to quickly show you before I continue, you chain one, cut and finish off. But now I've got that neat edge as I had before, and I've got the top two stitches. I'm going to turn it over to do my next row, so that row 2 goes into these stitches here as if they are my back loop, and row 3 comes down and takes these stitches here to cover that row over. But I'm still left, when I take those stitches, with 2 loops at the back, which gives me a nice border edge to continue as if it's a normal stitch. So this is my preferred way of beginning my foundation row. So I'm going to continue and make 25 stitches for my first row. If you're doing in the round, do 18, and then I'll show you now how to join. When you've done that, take this back to the beginning, go into that first chain. You know how you made 2 and you went into the first one? Go into the second one, pull your end through, wrap your yarn over, pull that through that chain, and then pull it through that stitch, and that's how you join into a circle. This tail end will just tighten that up, but so will the other stitches soon. So if you've done any other form of starting, if you've done a chain and a single crochet, you would have these 2 top loops. You just need to take the back one. I'm sorry I keep waving my wrist around. I burnt my hand. I can't cover it over because it's really irritating, and even my sleeve touching it is really hurting, so I'm just having to let it. You can see how pink and sore it is. I'm really sorry. I know it doesn't look very nice, but believe us, it's sore. So yes, if you've done any other form of starting row, then you just use the back loop on this next row. If you've done it this way, how I do it, then we'll turn it upside down, and we're just going to use that loop as if it's the back loop. So begin with a standing single crochet, which for that you start with your slip knot on your hook, and you go straight into there and pull through like that. So it would be a double crochet in US terms, a standing double crochet or a standing single crochet in UK terms. And now we're just going to do that all the way along. These are off stitches. Now the options you've got with those first single crochets, which should be through both top loops as normal, you can start this B row if you like. Instead of doing the single crochet in the first stitch on the B rows, you can start your B row into the second stitch. Just don't make that initial single crochet, and then start your off stitches with the standing, just the same as we have there, in the second stitch, and miss the first stitch. And then when you start row 3, you do a double crochet or a treble crochet into the stitch below, so you end up with just a solid, in this case green row going all the way up the edge, and the reverse of your work doesn't start until the second stitch in, like this one. So if I separate these tails, you'll see that it has this one double crochet stitch going all the way down the bottom edge, the front edge, but the other side doesn't start until the second stitch in. And can you see there's no layers between, there is just a channel between each like that. Yeah, it's cool. Anyway, let's continue because I'm faffing about here. We need these off stitches all the way along, and then the last one, if you were doing the other option, you would stop at the second last stitch, chain one, cut and finish off, but I'm going to go all the way to the edge and do the single crochet finish. There are several options for the edge stitches that I want to cover, but I don't really want to stretch this out. I want to try and keep this just informative, and then I want to build on it. So my plan is to show you a few options with this to be going on with, to play with. You can do samples of different formulas, of combinations of stitches and colours and whatever. I don't know. Fill your boots. It's your imagination. I'm giving you the tools to use it however you like. This is the last stitch, and I'm not stopping on the second last, I'm going into the last because I'm going to go from end to end. I chain one and then cut and finish off. So now we've got a lovely neat row for row 2B, and then can you see I've still got 2 stitches available on the front because I'm going to take this one on the next row. All of these ones are going to get taken on the next stitch, but on the back it's nice and neat, and on the bottom, even when I take that stitch, I'm still going to have 2 loops to make my border into. So that to me is my preferred way of doing a foundation row. Gives a nice, it's not pulling in or anything, it's not tight in any way, it's lovely. Okay, so that's row 2B. Sorry for waffling. Row 3 is an A row. We change colour on every row, and your first stitch goes into the first one through both loops, single crochet or US double crochet. And now we're going to do on stitches all the way along and finish with the same in the last one, single crochet or double crochet. So on stitches, I'm going to do option 1. If you've got the written pattern, you'll know what that is already. Option 1 is a normal, it's a double crochet in UK terms, or a treble crochet in US terms, and it doesn't go where it normally goes. Like usually this stitch would be taller, so, and it would go into the 2 top loops there like that, but we're not going to put it there, and that stitch isn't taller, it's just a single crochet, single height. So we're going to drop down into that stitch there, that front loop, and make that stitch into that front loop. Like that. Okay. And I'm going to do that all the way along. So you insert your hook up and under that loop, pull down a loop, wrap your yarn over towards you again, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through the other 2. Right? Now I'm showing you this, and then I want to show you something else before I go any further, because there's an option with these to make it less gappy. And this is why I deliberately used the bigger hook, because I wanted to show you this. So if you do, instead of doing your double crochet like that, you link them So you see this bit that wraps over here, there's a crossover there. Take your hook and put it down there, and then put your yarn over and pull through a hoop. Then go into your next front loop there, pull through another loop, then yarn over, then pull through 2, then yarn over, then pull through 2, and you've linked those together. Then go down, yarn over, pull through, go up there, your next loop, pull through, go through, and go through. Can you see what's happening? So if you want to do that, you can link them all. And if you were here, I would ask you which you would prefer us to do for all of these. I'm doing it nice and slowly, but it's actually quicker. Don't know, I think it's neater. Should I do it like this? I think we'll do it like this. Okay, I shall start this row again and we'll do it all like that. I've decided. You've talked us into it. Right. So these are, I suppose, are they linked drop double crochets? Linked on stitches, we'll call them. Don't know what they're called. To be honest, I've got no idea. I saw something on Instagram, I mean probably last year or the year before, and it stuck in my head, and I tried it and I liked it, and I've used it a couple of times. No idea who it was. Scrolling, and it was just one of them. So anyway, I'm going to do all of these all the way along, finishing with a single crochet on the last stitch. There. How cool is that? But now, when we turn it over, we've got this flap where they're all separate, hence why we need to lock them. 4 is all lock stitch, so I just want to show you this. Yeah, look how much you can't see through them, even with a fat hook. Isn't that good? With Aran weight yarn and a number 7mm hook. Anyhow, I wanted to show you the differences between the lock stitch, because there's 2 loops that you can lock with. We'll have to use these back 2 loops. We use one from this row and one from, use the back loop. You always put a lock stitch into an on stitch, and you always use the back loop to lock it with. So that leaves the front loop free for another lock stitch to go into, or to turn it off, leave it alone. So we use the back loop plus one of the other loops and make a off stitch through those to lock them. So this off stitch is called a lock stitch. It's the same movement. So we're choosing a loop here, and I want to show you the difference. This one uses the outer loop, which is the back loop, both back loops, because now everything has a pair. When you do one, you do the other. If you do one on the front, you miss one on the back before you go to the next, and you pair that one with that one. And if you do the back, you miss one on the front, you go to the next, you pair them, you know, like that. So everything now has a pair with the lower row. So we're going to now, this one uses the back loop, the outer loop of the lower row, and it's all flat and smooth, and this one uses the inner loop, and it's not so smooth. So to show you closer, this one There's nothing, it's just, if you look at the edge here, it's smooth. There's no sticky out bits at all. That uses the outer loop, the back loop of the lower row. This one uses the inner loop, and as you can see, it's left behind the outer loop, and it's got these ridges. Can you see those? My intention is to show you to use this stitch throughout all of the main background in between the hearts, not in the middle of the hearts. I'm going to use this stitch all in between the hearts and around the crosses, and then I'm going to use the pom-poms for the hearts, and then in the middle of the hearts I'm going to do the front post stitch, so that we get a mixture of all of the options. Because you don't have to link these ones, you can just do a normal double crochet. It goes in the same hole. I'm not going to show you that, it's basic. So that's how I'm going to be doing it, and I thought with this, leaving this ridge in the middle, that if we did this version of lock stitch for this example, then the back will match the front a little bit more, because they'll both have the ridgy bits on the back and the front. So I'm going to do that so that you can see how that looks in a full repeat. I want to say also that these were made, you'll notice that this at the bottom and this at the top on the single versions are out of line. This was made from the pattern I made 2 years ago, and it was off centre. There were mistakes on that pattern. It was the first pattern I ever wrote, and this is why I am now redoing it with a video to correct the mistakes and to do it fully how I intended to in the first place, because my head wasn't there at the time and now it is. And like I say, I've learned a lot technology wise, and I've had time to sort of prepare more and go better about it, I think. And I'm sorry Marina's charisma got a bit dropped, but I had a bit of a breakdown, and like I say, my head's a bit more where it should be now, and I'm starting to focus a lot more. So here we go. Let's get on with this back lock stitch. Here, move these. Row 4, begin with your stitch under both top loops again, and then we take the back loop of your on stitch. Always put a lock stitch in the top of your on stitch using the back loop only, and then take either the inner loop or the outer loop, whichever you want to create, but for today I'm taking the inner loop. And then you make the same movement as your edge stitch and your off stitch. You make the same movement. It's a lock stitch because you're locking both rows together like this. Taking the inner loop, creating the same movement. This is a lock stitch, and these need to be done all the way along to lock all of the row, so that there's no flap anymore. Look, it's gone. They're getting linked, and it's leaving behind this row of ridges, which quite matches the front now. So I'm going to carry on and finish this row. This is row 4, and it's a yarn B row. And there is row 4, yarn B, complete. Single crochet, double crochet through both loops either end, and then 23 stitches in the middle with the ridge at the back, all locked, no flap. If you're doing in the round, you won't have these edge stitches, and you will have 18 on stitches in a circle, all locked like that. Row 5 is an A row, and this is where we start the pattern setup. So like we did when I showed you the chart symbols and how the chart worked, we're going to leave that border of a blank stitches on the end with no design in to match this on the bottom, and along the top it will be. So I'm going to make the first stitch a normal on stitch into that first loop, and then I'm going to link the next one. You don't have to link if you're not linking, just make 2 on, whichever decision of on stitch you've made, make 2 of them. And then I'm going to make 1 off and 5 on 3 times for 1 repeat. So the on stitch goes in the back loop of the next stitch. I've missed 2 stitches at the back to correspond with the 2 stitches I've made on the front, because everything's done in pairs. So if you make a stitch there, you move along missing the back so that you can lock it on the next one. If you go in that stitch, you're going to increase your stitches and end up with a wrong number, and you're not going to be able to lock that stitch. So remember, they come in pairs. So 1 lock, 5 on. One, I'm linking mine. I'm not used to crocheting with my arms on a desk, you know, and I'm finding it quite awkward. Also, I've got this wooden shelf on top of my white desk because I found that the white desk was reflecting far too much. And things are sticking to it. I think I'll have to get my sander out. Right, so 5 on. And now we're at the end of the repeat. So if you were doing in the round, you would only do from here. You wouldn't do these edge stitches, these 3 stitches. You would begin with this first stitch. This off stitch would be your first stitch, and you would do the 3 repeats of 1 off, 5 on, and now you would be back at the beginning if you were in the round, and your next stitch you would do that again. So if you were doing more than 1 repeat, you would do that again. So now for this end, we need 1 off and 2 on to match the opposite edge. But when you're doing repeats in rows, you only have those 18 stitches, those 3 repeats of them, and then for your next repeat you do it again, and you do it again, and you do it again, and then when you get to the end of your repeats, however many times you're doing, you make these 3 stitches, off, on, on. And then finish with your single one through both loops. And it is symmetrical, but the reason it doesn't work when you're reading the written instructions when you're left-handed, it comes out a mirror image, which doesn't matter in this case, but when you read in the written instructions excuse me, it doesn't translate right for the repeats, because the repeats go from there to there in the middle of my fingers. So if you're reading it the other way, it goes the other way, and the stitches are wrong. There you go. So that's row 5. Like you learned on when I was showing you the charts, and before when we did the first row, we have to lock these flaps. So, but when I was showing you the charts and I was saying that the code dictates itself, when you're actually crocheting, you can see what needs to be done instantly. So half of the time you don't even need a pattern. Just, you know, to see how easy this actually is. So you can see I haven't even looked at the pattern what needs to be done yet, and neither have you haven't seen it. So you can see though, they need locked. That one is going to be an on, because that's where hearts start. They need locked, that's an on. They need locked, that's an on. They need locked, that's an on. They need locked. They can't, there's, you know, unless they were off stitches, which they're not, because we know they're hearts. There aren't any off stitches down here, so I don't even need to look at the pattern to see that, but I'll show you. And then we'll do this. So begin, and to read the pattern as I go, 2 lock, 1 on. I'm going to make this on a popcorn. And to do a popcorn, you work 5 double crochets or treble crochets, option 1 of the off stitch, the on stitch. You make 5 into the same loop as that you've been working into for the on stitches. It's just combinations of the same stitch. Look. And then you take your hook out and you put it back through both top loops of the first one you made. See that post there? It's the 2 loops at the top, because the loops are left behind as you make the stitch, so it's to the right of the post. If you're left-handed, it's the loops to the left, because your stitches go the opposite way. But when you're right-handed, it's the loops to the right. And you pull it through like that, and then you chain 1, and that's your popcorn. We're going to carry on because these have to be locks. Lock again with the middles. Five lock. One on. And it matches what we did below. You do it 3 times. Popcorn. One, 2, 3, 4, 5. See, that's how loose they are when they're not linked together. And that's what they would have looked like there. Okay. Again. Slippery little sucker. There you go. So there we have the finished row of popcorns with popcorns on the front in yarn B, and the missed stitches at the back that are going to get locked into on the next row. Then we're going to use the back loop of the chain stitch we made to fasten the popcorn stitch. The back loop of that with the inner loop of the lower row as we did before. So they get locked like that using the chain back loop. So let's have a look at the next row. Unlike row 6, row 7's got lots of changes, so it's a bit more choppy and fun. So I'm going to put my chart on the screen, and I can't watch the camera at the same time. But it begins with those 2 blank stitches that we have at the edge. So we make 2 on stitches. First one just a normal on, and the second one I'm forgetting, and I'm telling you to do it. You link. Like that. And then we have a lock stitch. This is the beginning of your repeat when you're repeating. Lock. So the back loop of the chain that you lock the popcorn with, and the inner loop of the row below. Make your lock stitch go through and through. And then we have an off stitch. Then we have 3 on, so you've made that off stitch, but you need to miss one at the front. Remember, they're in pairs. So if you're not sure, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, miss one, get the middle 3. You need 3 on. So just have a little count, have a little double check, because it's worth it. If you make a mistake, I'm not sure how these would work to fix them, so I'll have to I'm not a one for fixing mistakes, to be honest, only if they're drastic. Right, there's me 3 on, then 1 off, 1 lock into the chain. Make sure you get the chain and not the first stitch there. Lock it there. If you want to lock the B rows on the outer loop instead for a variation, you can. It's 2 on, then it's an off. Make sure you miss the 2 at the back. 2 on, you know the next one's a lock because it's a popcorn. Then we have an off. Make sure you skip one, count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, take those 3. Sometimes the popcorn just slightly covers over that one, so you may miss it. That's why I'm saying to absolutely double check that you're getting the right 3. You don't want them to be all slanted and out of line, because that will just spoil your finish. You can do these slanted. I'm going to show you how to do those, not today though. So that's 3. Then we've got 1 off. This is the last stitch of your repeat. So you would repeat from your first lock stitch to that final off stitch as many times as you need to in the round or in rows, and then you finish with a lock stitch and 2 on. And your final stitch through both loops. Row 8 begins with 2 locks. Then 1 off, 1 on, because it's a B row where all on stitches are popcorns. Three lock. I go on autopilot because I know, you know, the stitches are writing themselves, but I always feel like I have to double check the chart and read out what it says. One on B row, it's a popcorn. One off above the other popcorn. 2 lock. on, 2 lock, 1 off above that popcorn, 1 on, 3 lock, 1 on, and this is your final stitch of your repeat. One off, 2 lock, 'a bit of a knot there. Well, actually that reminds me, I need to show you how to do these ends. See that there? Just put it that way and fasten over it as you do your stitch, and then all your ends will be facing in over, ready to channel them into there. And I just totally forgot to show you how to do it, but anyway, I'll pull them through at the end and I'll show you. I'll do it from now on. That's that row finished. And then your first stitch of the repeat is another on stitch. Then we've got a lock, and an off, and an on, which isn't linked to anything, so it's just a normal drop down on stitch, another off, and a lock. Again, make sure you get the chain and not the bit in front or the stitch after. Make sure you get the chain. Where am I? A lock, 2 on, these do seem to be taking a little bit longer. I mean, it's because I'm concentrating on so many things at once doing this, it is being slower. 1 off, but in itself it's worth it. I think it's beautiful. 1 lock, 1 off, and you mirror what you've done basically on the other side. 1 off, 2 on. Make sure you miss that off stitch at the bottom. One lock, 1 off, 1 on, 1 off, 1 lock, that was your last repeat on. Again, I will just switch off the camera now and finish these off camera. Row 10, yarn B, I've done the first bits, and the first stitch of your repeat is a lock. Off, on, lock, on, off, 2 lock, one on, one off, above the popcorn below, one on, two lock, one off, one lock, on, sorry, one lock, one on, one off. That's your last repeat stitch. Three lock. Row 11 is the beginning of the middle of the whole heart, and I'm going to show you the front post on stitches to mix it up a bit. I should have really done them in the middle of here and in the edge halves as well, but I forgot. So I'm just going to put them in this central one for the one repeat, and it'll give it an extra dimension and make it stand out from all the rest. You know, win-win. So row 11, yarn A, I've done the first couple of stitches, and then, so now this is the first stitch of the repeat, and it's another 2 on stitches, which obviously I'm linking these ones. And then when we get to the middle of that heart, we're going to start the front post ones. The first one won't be your front post, but I'm telling you about it now. Also, you might notice that I didn't carry on crocheting over my ends, because I'm going to put a bulkier border on anyway, so I'm just going to continue as I am. So I've got 4 ons, then 1 lock, then 1 off, because that is the last popcorns, we don't put one in the middle of there. Another lock, two on, I'm quite enjoying these linked stitches. I am finding them a bit slower, but it's just because I don't do them all the time. It's enjoyable doing something, a different movement, for sure. So too, well, that was supposed to be, and I've done 3 through yapping. So I'll take that one out. One off, one lock, one on. This one just a normal one. You can, if you want, go through there, but I don't like to because it pulls all of your locked work on the back. So for the first one, I'd just like to go a normal option 1 drop down stitch, one lock, one off, 2 on, one lock, one off, one lock, one on is your last repeat stitch, and then I shall finish the rest off camera. They are all on stitches. Row 12 is a B row, and I've already done the first lock stitches. The first 2 are part of your edge, and the first 2 stitches of your repeat are lock stitches, and then it's 3 off, then 2 lock, I just want to say, actually, I'm finding I could have used a number 8 with this very easily and made it looser. It is still quite stiff. I love a squidgy mosaic blanket. I don't like it when they're really tight. One off. On. Sorry, it's a popcorn. One off, one lock, one off, one on, two lock, three off, two locks are your last repeats, and 2 locks to finish off, and I shall do these off camera. Row 13 is the yarn A row. I've done the first 2, and the first stitch of your repeat is an off stitch, and it's 5 on stitches. one off, one lock, three on. Now the first one is a normal, just a drop down double or treble crochet. The middle one we can make a front post, so I'm not going to link it, I'm going to leave these separate, and instead of going into that loop as we normally do, you put your hook under so it's all the way through everything that's there but that you haven't caught any pink from the back. Then put your yarn over and pull your loop through as you normally do. Yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2, and then the third one of the yarns just normal again into that front loop and not locked. And it's one lock, one off, 5 on. Don't forget to miss your stitches underneath, like that one. 1, 2, I didn't lock, link. That was your last stitch of your repeat. Then we have 1 off and 2 on before your final stitch through both loops. Row 14 begins with 2 lock stitches on your edge, but this here, this on stitch, isn't part of a heart, it's part of a cross. So I'm not going to make that as a popcorn. I'm going to make it as a front post, but the first one will just be a normal drop down, and then the one above it will be a front post. So 1 on into the front loop, just a normal on. You could do them popcorns, but the ones that go across wouldn't be popcorns because the across ones aren't drop downs, so it would look a bit odd with, it would look like a divide sign maybe. 5 lock after you drop on. Maybe you might think it looks better like divide signs, like love and sharing, sharing and caring. This one's a popcorn, this on. 1 on. One off, 1 lock, actually it's 3 lock, not just 1, so this is the second and the third. 1 off, 1 on, another popcorn, five lock, one on. Again, This is just a single on, not a popcorn on. 2 lock and then your final stitch through both loops. Row 15 is an A row. I've done the first 2. The first stitch of your repeat is a lock into that single on stitch. Then we need 2 offs. These are the 2 offs for your cross. Remember, like we did when I was teaching you about the charts, which leaves the centre part, and then your next up part of your cross comes along that one. So 2 offs. Then 2 ons. Be sure to leave your 2 off stitches free. One off, 1 lock, five on. And these now, the first one's a normal one into your front loop. The second one is a front post. So make sure you go below where all of this is and pick up the post underneath there. So you are in the middle of all of the loops there. Put your yarn over towards you and pull it through. Yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. Do it again in the middle one. Make sure you get right round there in the middle. Pull through 2, pull through 2, and then do it again in the third one, like this. Pull through 2, pull through 2, and then do your normal one in the end one. The last 5th one on stitch is just a normal one again. Then lock your popcorn. Make 1 off stitch. Let's just have a little look before we move on and see how different that is. It's cool. Right, we need 2 on stitches. Make sure you miss that off stitch that's hiding underneath your popcorn. Two off to make your cross for the cross, and that is your last repeat stitch, and then we finish with 1 lock and 2 on. How pretty is that, with that bit extra texture in the middle? The back's still the same, flat, with its little ridges going on. Row 16, B row, begins with 2 lock stitches, which I've completed, and the first stitch of your repeat is the on stitch of your cross. So I'm going to make that a front post, like we are the middle of the heart, by going around it like that. Pull through a loop, pull through 2, and pull through 2, and then we make 2 off stitches, two lock stitches, one on. This one's a popcorn because it's the heart edge. 1 off, 5 lock, 1 off, 1 on, which is the popcorn, two lock, split that bit again. Don't split your wool, it weakens your work. 2 off, 1 on, front post, 2 lock, row 17 is an A row and the first stitch of your repeat is a lock stitch. Then we have 3 on stitches, one off, 1 lock, seven on. The first one's a normal one, the 5 in the middle are front post, at least that's how I've chosen to do them. You might not choose to do it this way. You may have chosen to do all of the middle of the heart's popcorns. And then the last one of the 7 is just a normal one again with a front loop, stitch, off, 3 on, make sure you miss that one, one on, sorry, 1 lock and 2 on. I got distracted because I just heard the fox in the background. We've got a fox that comes round and I can hear it. So 2 on to finish. Row 18 is a B row and it begins with 2 lock stitches, and your first stitch of the repeat is an off. Then we have 3 lock, I don't know what you're thinking of this so far. Anyway, if you've got this far and watched this far, you must be enjoying it, I suppose, so thank you very much. Even if you've skipped through to write these down and do them at your own pace, it's absolutely fine. The next stitch is an on. Then we've got 1 off and 7 lock. One off and then 1 on. Three lock. One off, 2 lock, and then your last stitch and finish. Row 19 is an A row, and the first stitch of your repeat is an on stitch. And then another 2 on stitches. If you're working in rows, you would have done 5 on stitches to begin with. In rounds, 3 on stitch to begin with. One off, 1 lock, 4 on. Remember, your first one's a normal on stitch, and then we're doing front post. So these 3 next ones are front post. I love the texture the front post gives. It's really tactile, and this sock I showed you a picture of at the beginning, I will be doing a pattern to cover that in the round, and it's made with this stitch, the front post stitch. I made that sock about a year and a half ago, and there's a whole story behind that sock waiting to be told, so I'm going to tell you about that. So on this section I've just made, sorry I was babbling again, I've just made, after because I was babbling, I'm just going to recap. Began the row with 5 on, but if you're working in the round you begin with 3 on, then there's an off, then there's a lock, then there are 4 on stitches. The first one is a drop down normal in the front loop, and the next 3 are front post in my case. Then there's an off, and then there are 4 on. That one I've done wrong because I was babbling. One lock, one off, and 5 on to finish. Row 20 begins with 5 lock stitches, 3 if you're only doing the repeat, and then 1 on stitch, and then we have 1 off, 4 lock, one on, four lock, one off, one on, finish with five off, 5 lock, sorry, finish with 5 lock, row 21 is an A row and the first stitch of your repeat is an off stitch, followed by 2 on stitches, and 1 lock, one off, three on, these are front posts, notice that we've turned that one off, we haven't put an on stitch into it, and that's because the heart shape now starts to make its way in over. These 3 ons were front posts because they're part of the heart. So now 1 off, 1 lock, one off, 3 on, in my case I'm doing front post, one off, 1 lock, two on, and these 2 on stitches are the last stitches of your repeat, and then we finish with 1 off and 2 on at the end of the row. Row 22 is a B row. The first stitch of your repeat is an on stitch. Two lock, one off, one on, three lock, one on, one off, one on, three lock, one on, one off, two lock, and that's the last stitch of your repeat. To finish the row, one on, two lock. Row 23 is an A row, and your first stitch of your repeat is a lock stitch. One off, two on, one lock, one off, one on, in my case that's a front post, one off, one lock, one on. This one's just a normal drop down on because it's outside of the heart, I'm not making it a front post. One lock, one off, one on, again this one's a front post, one off, one lock, two on, get right in there with that popcorn because it's hiding your first on stitch. One off, and that is your final repeat stitch. And then to finish your row, one lock, two on, your first repeat of row 24B is an off stitch, one on, two lock, one off, one on, one lock, one on, one lock, sorry, one off, one lock, one off, one on, one lock, 1 on, 1 off, 2 lock, 1 on, 's the last stitch of your repeat. Finish with 1 off, 2 lock. 25A, the first stitch of your repeat, is an on stitch. Then 1 lock, 1 off, 2 on, 1 lock, 1 off, 1 lock, 3 on. These are no longer, I'm not doing front posts anymore, they've gone back to being just normal. In this case I'm using linked stitches. One lock, 1 off, 1 lock, 2 on, 1 off, 1 lock is your final repeat stitch. And then you finish your row with 3 on, row 26B, the first stitch of your repeat is a lock stitch. Then we have 1 off and 1 on, two lock, three off, three lock, three off, two lock, 1 on, 1 off above the popcorn. That's your last stitch of the repeat. Finish with 3 lock on your row. Row 27 is an A row, and the first 2 stitches of your repeat are 2 on stitches. One lock, one off, 5 on, one off, 5 on, one off, one lock, and one on is the last stitch of your repeat, and then you finish your row with 3 on. The first 2 stitches of your repeat for row 28, which is the yarn B row, are 2 lock stitches, then 1 off, 1 on, five lock, one on, which is for your cross, 5 lock, one on, one off, and 1 lock completes your repeat. And to end the row, make 3 lock stitches. The first 2 stitches, 3 stitches of your repeat are 3 on, 1 lock, 1 off, 2 on, make sure you miss that off stitch, 2 off for the centre of your cross, 1 lock, 2 off, 2 on, 1 off, 1 lock, 2 on ends your repeat, and then you finish the row with 3 on. Begin row 30B, the repeat of row 30B, with 3 lock. One off, 1 on, 2 lock, 2 off, 1 on. This is the centre of the cross, so I'm going to make it a front post as I did before. 2 off, 2 lock, 1 on, 1 off, 2 lock, end your repeat, and finish the row with 3 lock. The first 4 stitches of your repeat on row 31, which is a yarn A row, are 4 on stitches. One lock, 1 off, 3 on, 1 lock, 3 on, 1 off, 1 lock, 3 on, the 3 on are just the last 3 stitches of your repeat, and then you finish the row with 3 on. Row 32 is yarn B row, and the first 4 stitches of your repeat are 4 locks. Then 1 off, 1 on, 3 lock, 1 off, 3 lock, 1 on, 1 off, 3 lock, end your repeat, and then finish the row with 3 lock. Row 33, yarn A, the first stitch of your repeat is an off stitch. Four on, 1 lock, 1 off, 5 on, 1 off, 1 lock, 4 on, end your repeat, then end the row with 1 off, 2 on. row 34 is a B row, and the first stitch of your repeat is an on stitch, 4 lock, one off, one on, five lock, one on, one off, 4 lock, ends your repeat, and then you finish the row with 1 on and 2 lock. At this point I need to explain that row 34 is the end of the first repeat. From here on in, if you want to do more repeats, at the end of row 34 you go back to row 7 and you repeat from row 7 on to 34 continuously, however many times you need to repeat lengthways. At the end of row 34, or however many times you want to repeat, you then continue with row 35. But you don't do row 35 until you've finished all of the repeats from row 7 to 34 inclusively. So now I'm going to continue with row 35. And the first stitch of your repeat is a lock stitch. You can stop at any point at the end of any B row, after any B row, but on your last A row previous to that, don't put any on stitches on, and so you've turned them all off, and then you can make this row your sort of finishing row like I am. But to balance your pattern from end to end, make this row 34 your last row, and then you can finish rows 35 to 37 inclusively. So now after your first lock stitch of your repeat, we're going to do 5 on stitches. Notice there would normally be an off stitch here to continue, but we're not putting those off stitches on because we're ending the repeats, not continuing. So I'm going to make 5 on stitches. You'll have to let us know in the comments whether you've liked this stitch or whether you've disliked the stitch, or whether you've liked the video, what you've disliked about it. I'm really learning. I know things are going slow, but you know, crochet is a slow thing. It's called slow fashion for a reason. So and you'll know that things take time when you're making them yourself, but they're well worth it in the long run. 1 lock that was after your 5 on, and then 5 on. So yeah, let us know below how you've found everything. and the charts. I'm especially interested in what you think about the charts with the binary code system. And if you do download the sheets from the pattern on Ravelry, please do let us know how you find them, and if you how else you find ways to use them. Dead interested. If you need to contact us as well, you can contact us through the message system on Ravelry. You can just search for my name, Lisa J. Richardson. Don't forget the J, because there is another Lisa Richardson who does knitting and crochet, but I can't help having the same name, so I've put the J in to make mine different. 1 lock, then another 5 on. One lock, two on. Row 36 is a B row, and your first stitch is an off stitch of your repeat. Then we have 5 lock stitches. Also, if you know who is responsible for this linked stitch, do let us know. I don't know if I said earlier or not that I haven't seen it done in Mosaic Crochet. I've only seen it done as a single layer of fabric, and not as on Mosaic Crochet as a front layer. So if you know who this stitch is responsible for, or brought back to life by, do let us know, please. Thank you. So yeah, 5 lock, then 1 off, 5 lock, I always think it's a bit crazy, you know, there are only so many loops available to make a stitch into in the vicinity of where you're working, and there are so many ways. It's like working this chart, you know, with binary, turning the loops on and off. I love it. Crochet is crazy, and it's so therapeutic. Absolutely amazing craft. 1 off, 5 lock, even if you don't have an imagination and you just turn things on and off, and you change colour on every other row, and then, you know, do blocks. Maybe you'll change your 2 colours every 10 rows, or do 2 rows every day as a temperature blanket, and just turn every other stitch on and off, all the way along. You're going to end up with a beautiful, beautiful blanket. You don't have to go all intricate and make designs and stuff, but now that you know that binary chart system, it's so easy to do. I hope you have fun with it anyway, but please do let us know how you use it, because I am dead interested. So now you can see that row is just a complete switched off row. They are all locked and often locked. And can you see this doesn't need blocking at all? It just lays flat. It's a beautiful fabric. That's the end of row 36. All of row 37 is on stitches, so you can just whiz along and get those done, and I shall meet you back for the final lock row. The last row, row 38, leaves one big flap at the back. I hit a knot, so these ends are just going to get locked in. I'll show you how to do that. Yeah, the last row is just a lock row, but instead of taking the inner loop as I have been, I'm going to take the outer loop. So I'm just going to pick up that one, if you can see from my fingers, like that, and complete the off stitch through those to lock them. So it's actually easier because it's sticky uppy, and just lock these all the way along, and this is your final row. But notice I didn't change yarn colour, we stay on yarn A, and this matches the back of the work to the bottom edge, as you can see, closes it off. So I'll see you at the end and we'll have a little recap about what's what.